as designers who are charged with shaping and creating futures, I'm seeing a much smaller world now thanks to digital connectivity. This beautiful tapestry of intersectionalities, demographics, all the different ways you could slice our global society. When the teams that are claiming to design this great stuff are not mirroring that beautiful tapestry that is the world, then we're underserving our ability to create the right futures.
Hello, I'm Doug Powell. Welcome to This is a Prototype, the Design Leadership Podcast. I've covered a lot of territory with my guests in Season 2 of this series, taking a broad look at the current state of the design profession from multiple angles and points of view. I kicked off the season by discussing the reinvention of design leadership with Kate Aronowitz and Robert Fabricant. I spoke to Kalina Sales and Sadie Redwing about the colonialization of design and design history. I visited the City Hall of Canton, Georgia with Mayor Bill Grant, the neighborhoods of Hartford, Connecticut with Richard Holland, and went on a design road trip across Europe with Daniela Marzavan. Educators Jonathan Hanahan and Vivek Rao revealed how AI is showing up in design classrooms and university campuses. And the theme of reinvention surfaced again, this time on a personal level with Jenna Date. And all of these themes and stories were placed in the context of the emerging and evolving role of the design leader. I continue casting this wide net with my guest for this, the 10th and final episode of Season 2, Kevin Bethune. Kevin is a design leader and author with a remarkably divergent background that spans engineering, business, and design over more than 25 years. He's worked as a nuclear engineer at Westinghouse Nuclear. He's created and launched sneaker brands at Nike and consulted with global enterprises at BCG. Kevin currently leads Dreams, Design, and Life, a think tank that delivers design and innovation services using a human-centered approach. A board trustee for ArtCenter College of Design and a board director for the Design Management Institute, Kevin is the author of one of my favorite design books, Reimagining Design, Unlocking Strategic Innovation, which was published by MIT Press in 2022. Kevin's next book, Nonlinear, Navigating Design with Curiosity and Conviction, will be published in February of next year. As we begin our conversation, Kevin tells me the story of his surprising journey to design.
I can say that I found design sort of in the middle of my career, not at the beginning, but based on the way the world is moving, I'm very thankful for the timing in that I started my career with creative inclinations. I drew for hobby, but I couldn't necessarily translate that to like seeing how a formal design or innovation career could even be possible. And honestly, those words were probably abstract notions that I probably couched under the realm of art at the time, right, wrong, or indifferent. But because of my interests intersecting with math and science, I chose engineering as a first step. So I was a mechanical engineer, ended up entering the nuclear industry. Of all industries, the nuclear industry had been facing a knowledge crisis in that they were concerned about all the engineers that had invented the world's nuclear operating plants across the globe. They were on the verge of retirement, and so they were very hungry to bring out new talent. And so compared to other industries that hadn't necessarily had that same like wide open door for opportunity, I just went right through and got incredible product experiences early and often, and especially compared to my peers. I mean, I was traveling the world, working over nuclear reactors with high-performing teams. Just an incredible set of experiences. Fast forward, a curiosity for business sort of crept in there. And I wanted to just connect the dots more broadly of like what was the bigger picture around some of these engineering projects that led to, getting an MBA eventually. And then I wound up at Nike Inc. of all places. Come graduation, Nike definitely was sort of a desirable landing point because I felt like they had embodied all these disciplines together, the technology, the business side, of course, but then also this unknown territory of creativity. And I started in a conventional role as a business planner, typical post-MBA job coming out of school. But the product person from within was hungry to meet and find out where the product opportunities were happening. So I networked across the Nike campus, engaged in stretch assignments to show that maybe I had potential to play in the product arena. And eventually I was invited to join the global footwear product engine of Nike. And that's when I saw professional design in practice for the first time. And the creative curiosity started nudging me to ask questions, engage in more stretch assignments. And that's when I started meeting some newfound creative mentors and friends that saw that I had some raw skill for my hobbies as a illustrator on the side. They encouraged me to actually try my hand on real footwear design. Dwayne Edwards was the first creative mentor that gave me my first shot, if you will. And I would meet him in the early mornings. We would commiserate on projects that he didn't have enough designers for. I would pick up those briefs, and then we would go do our day jobs respectively. And then at night, I would work on his stuff. So over the course of a year doing that, got a couple of shoes in the market, and that just started a whole slew of opportunities where design became an essential component in my multidisciplinary story.
It's funny with all of these conversations that I have with design leaders, and I ask this question almost every time. The first words out at the different versions of, well, it wasn't really a straight line, or it was kind of there were kind of some unexpected aspects of it. But Kevin, I think you take the prize for with literally nuclear engineering being the first path, and then eventually finding design. Just an amazing story. What do you think you carry through from those earliest days and those earliest roles that you were playing in that completely different industry? I mean, I was hearing notes of like curiosity, that you were really seemed to be trying to solve something or see something that wasn't necessarily obvious in what you were being asked to do as an engineer in that setting. Do I have that right?
No, that is right. I think fortunately and unfortunately, in engineering, like if you tend to do relatively well in a project, the business naturally wants you to continue doing that well. And sometimes there's the proverbial like plateauing that engineers sort of face. And granted, like if you love that craft or that specialty and you want to do that over and over again, like absolutely great. There's honor in that, not dismissing that. But in the throes of those engineering projects, we faced really hard things. There were really tough mechanical challenges to unlock. There were really mission critical plant emergencies that we needed to like respond to and sort of clear the path of anything that we had going on to make room for that effort. The opportunity cost of a plant being down from power was really high. I mean, millions of dollars a day. So I think being confronted with very hard things in each of those projects naturally starts to feed into your ambition to want to solve bigger and bigger challenges. And so I did feel this sort of brewing conviction around, well, I am curious about some of the larger systemic variables that are surrounding these projects. I didn't have the language of business in my toolkit to fully understand, but just beginning to ask questions. And that was funny. There were friends from marketing that would come visit our engineering organization from time to time just to get information to inform a new proposal for the next effort. There were opportunities to stretch and help the marketing team provide the technical context for the next proposal. And then I started understanding, this is how they kind of price and scope the work for the next proposal for the next utility customer. And, they said, why don't you consider going to get your MBA, because it will round out your acumen to be able to just fully understand the strategic language, the finance language around this stuff. And sure enough, they were right. I mean, the business school experience rounded out that language. And then coming into Nike, it definitely tested like the understanding and the gravity that was Nike as a publicly traded entity, and literally writing a lot of the hot topic sound bites that as Nike senior executive would need to have to go into an earnings release call with Wall Street analysts. That definitely tested the mettle of locking in my acumen and making sure that I could withstand those high pressure moments.
You think Jordan had high pressure moments writing the script for a CEO on an earnings call for a publicly traded company? That is pressure, my friend.
Very fun moments iterating those scripts for those executives.
That's great. And so that system thinking, that instinct that you had to be seeing beyond what was in front of you, what was the formal sort of expectation of the role that the job that you were in, and kind of insisting, I can't do this really well unless I know, all of these other contributing factors and the environment in which it's happening.
Absolutely. I think also you start to just notice things that are happening outside of your day-to-day reality in the workplace. And you start picking up on some of these cognitive disconnects, just wanting to connect the dots. You see there's been pressing unmet needs facing target audiences that maybe the organization just isn't solving yet. And you're just wondering, like, why does it need to be that way? And then also, as I'm navigating, scratching the curiosity, engaging in more stretch assignments, figuring out how design starts to maybe percolate into that. And especially at the time when my design skills were fledgling at best, you still see like the organization being so mired in friction and politics between departments not necessarily being on the same page. And you look outside the walls and you see the need still waiting to be solved, and no one's solving it, even at the highest level of an organization like a Nike. And you just wonder, like, why does that have to be? Why not me, in terms of at least making experimental attempts to connect the dots?
Yeah. You've mentioned stretch assignments or stretch projects. Say more about that. Are those projects that you sought out, or that did somebody else see that potential in you and push you toward an opportunity?
Maybe more of the former, in that it was me, seeking out, and I think it was through initially coffee chats of just wondering, like, how can I put myself out there and express a desire to learn? Am I getting resonance or any level of receptiveness from the other party that I'm talking to? And of course, bumping into folks like Dwayne and others that gave me more of their mind share, and even being so bold to say, like, I will sponsor you, I will mentor you through a project. So definitely they had a hand in like completing the puzzle for an opportunity like that to happen. I mean, Dwayne, working with him, like, changed my life just through those initial runways with him. Design is possible for me. Mind you, it wasn't always welcome. The fact that I was working on stretch assignments outside of my day job, a lot of people asking questions like, what are you doing over there?
Yeah.
Or, executives coming over to my little cubicle, and wondering why I have prototypes when that isn't my role. So, that wasn't necessarily easy either to navigate some of the, we don't see you doing this, so there was a little bit of that.
Yeah, complex, scaled companies, even the most innovative among them, Nike being one, of course, are still very structured. That org chart is a bunch of boxes, and you're going to fit in one of those boxes. And the job isn't to go stretch into other boxes; it's to do your job, right?
Totally. I think one thing that did help, despite the the political mire that you mentioned, or the organizational matrix dynamics, was that I would still look at our CEO at the time, which was Mark Parker. He had come from design origins and sneaker design. He would always say, if you have an idea, you see a need, tell someone. So, I sort of looked to some of the leaders up high and said, you know what, I want to be part of that boldness that they represented at the origin of this company. So, there's a little bit of that DNA that I could latch onto to scratch, despite the opposition I was feeling.
Yeah. You mentioned Dwayne Edwards as being such a key figure. He's a legend, certainly in the footwear industry. To give for our listeners who might not be familiar with Dwayne, give us a little bit of a few sentences on why he was so impactful for you, but also just more broadly his sort of stature in the industry.
Through coffee chats, someone recommended I talk to Dwayne, and he gave me those 30 minutes. And I was just so enamored by the lore around him, in that when I met him, he was the footwear design director of Jordan Brand at the time, and even up until that point, the man had amassed, I kid you not, like $1 billion in footwear sales to his design credits. So he is just a machine of pumping out. And he was always like probably the earliest leader I remember, always being on campus. The work ethic with him was just, never met a more hardworking person, but also an empathic leader to his team. He was a rare leader in that he wasn't alpha, like so boisterous with his voice, not afraid to pull out the number two pencil, could sketch better than anyone I've seen. Just that consummate leader. And what was cool around the time of our relationship is that he was also experimenting. He was doing side hustles because he was on his path to figure out like, okay, I've done all this and had all this design success at a place like Nike. How might I help create opportunities to teach the next generation of footwear designer? Because none of the schools had necessarily dedicated or offer dedicated programs in footwear design. How might he sort of scratch that itch around outreach to help the next generation? So he started experimenting with a program what he called Future Soul in partnership with Carmelo Anthony. And it was a Nike-sponsored competition for high school students that would submit design, entries, and the winning shoe that was voted up would ultimately get made and would be sold at your Nike Towns and Foot Lockers. And it was a several-year successful pilot. And he literally, I watched him like write the job description that he wanted to say, you know what, I want to focus on outreach for the rest of my creative career. Perhaps whether he got support or not within the Nike environment, he was clearly going to do it anyway from those learnings, from his experimentation. As I was leaving Nike to go pursue more advanced education in design, he was making the same decision to really commit and double down on his vision around outreach. And that's when Pencil was born, initially incubated in Portland, and they've recently acquired a defunct HBCU in Detroit.
Yeah, Pencil Lewis College, an amazing story, and I'm familiar with that program that Dwayne's building there in Detroit, as you say. Really, just an amazing story. We'll do a whole episode. Now you've inspired me to reach out to Dwayne and have that conversation, because it's a great one. In your book, Reimagining Design, you talk really eloquently about some of the ways that you see design impacting companies that is not necessarily the way we always think of, not the direct or intended outcomes, but the ways that design is impacting culture or team dynamics. Can you talk a little bit about how you see design having that positive impact in these unexpected ways?
After watching how the world was unfolding, it was the advent of players like Apple, which at the time of my Nike employment was really doubling down on the iPod and the iTunes, these digital, physical, service-related ecosystems of opportunity. I'm starting to see design celebrated on the cover of business magazines, business schools adopting design thinking. So this convergence, I saw a little bit of myself in that. Post Nike, I went back to grad school for more design education. And as I was looking at what my next chapter of career would look like, entertaining all these different muscles working together, it was a little bit unsettling in that a lot of the opportunities were very much still wired toward that singular professional that had perhaps only done one discipline in their entire career. And that's what they viewed was a sort of the attractive candidate. A hybrid person like me, a lot of the companies just didn't see it. But I did have some of those exception-based conversations where I did meet a company or a startup or a group of business partners that saw mutual alignment around this multidisciplinary vision. And I started teaming with them, leaning into those conversations, sometimes for pay for some of the work we did, sometimes without pay, just out of sheer faith of like, let's work towards something. In those rarefied moments, we didn't have a playbook. The business partners were very much like, okay, what can you do, Kevin, as our initial sort of creative teammate? What's possible? And we would enter some of the boardrooms, the founding team rooms for some of our early clientele. And we were just very bold about like, hey, we're problem solving here. We're going to come at this from a technology perspective, from a creative perspective, from a business perspective, from a digital perspective. And we were coming in the room with all kinds of things. It wasn't just a PowerPoint deck. It was sketches, it was mock-ups, it was physical prototypes, digital prototypes, just to breed this culture of just collective problem solving. And I think I really am thankful that I met the small handful of business partners that I did down here in SoCal. We were sort of writing the playbooks as we were doing the work. And ultimately, we were working and fulfilling a multidisciplinary thesis that was very rare for the industry at the time. There was no limits on what design could bring to the table. And so every day was an opportunity to exhibit courage of like teaching my collaborators that, you know what, I'm going to show you something new that design can do. I'm going to show you what ethnographic research looks like. I'm going to show you how design can use visuals to synthesize this team conversation. I'm going to show how design can help this multidisciplinary collective peek around corners and anticipate where needs are ebbing and flowing, or anticipate how trends and different exemplars could inspire a new way of attacking the problem. I want to teach you system thinking and how we can connect the dots and show how value might be exchanged and visualize that so everyone's on the same page. So I got to feel out in that early work that design could be a powerful synthesizer. Design could be a powerful forecaster, predictor, anticipator. Design could be a facilitator to teach the other disciplines around the table that they could be creative too.
And of course, everyone else is thinking, wait a second, you're the guy who's supposed to move the pixels around on the screen and make sure that they look right, which is what the job description might be. But here you are kind of bringing this whole other set of behaviors and methods and vocabulary to this team that I imagine was having a transformational effect.
I think with one project, we sort of would look at the evidence that was created and say, oh, there's something here. And then we start holding that up to basically sell in the next project. And then the snowball just started rolling. Then we had some global players, global platforms reach out to our team with interest to acquire us, basically. First, it was Booz & Company at the time, which was they were definitely a very high caliber management consulting firm. And then it didn't end up working out with them, but BCG expressed interest because they had observed what we were doing in the previous platform. Yep. And then they acquired us. And so the road continued, and they've still invested in, sort of the platform where design is an equal third to the multidisciplinary recipe. But it was the evidence trail of stuff where you say, that's compelling. And I give BCG credit in that they were intellectually curious about what they didn't know. They didn't just prescribe to the tendency of, we're just looking for the pixel perfect pixel pushers, and that's all design is. Yep. They let us run as hard as possible. And, we almost set up sort of an anti-inverse consulting sort of relationship in that we weren't always necessarily on airplanes visiting BCG clients. They allowed us to build innovation centers where we encouraged BCG's clients to live in residence with our multidisciplinary teams. So you had 5 embeds, let's say, from a BCG client living in our innovation studio. The first one is literally 10 minutes down the road from where I live here in South Bay, Los Angeles. And they got an education and living with a venture team for, 12 to 18 months. And then the company would spin out. The designers that I hired showed courage in that some of them ended up becoming CEOs of the ventures that spun out of the incubator. So that's an incredible story where design showed impact.
Do you think that, well, I'll phrase it differently. I think we designers struggle to tell that part of the story, the value story. I think we too often sort of fall into the trap of talking about the very tactical deliverables that design is asked to do. And yet here you are bringing a whole set of value that is very unexpected and is not part of the ask. I just feel like we need to get better at talking about that part of what we do and how we do it.
I totally agree. To take any step forward in that early set of experiences did take a lot of courage, trial and tribulation, falling on our faces many times. But to your point, like to take our initial steps, we might have had to educate 10 times for every step to get our collaborators and stakeholders comfortable with what we're about to do or what I was about to suggest as a creative co-founder. And that, but after the evidence trail, like, oh, don't you want that? What we created in this last project? Oh yeah, I want that. And it becomes like, okay, now I have to educate you 5 times and then 2 times and then 1 time. And then you got it. And that's part of our methods. And the team doesn't have to necessarily ask for permission to demonstrate what it can do. We just enable the team to run and run fast. But to your point around like the pixel perfectness, that was still necessary too. So we had to bring in designers that could sweat the details because again, if we couldn't show a shippable deliverable that would work well and team well with development and deploy software and these kind of things, that had to work too. So we had to be very conscious. But as those designers came into this new muscle that we were creating, it was a growth opportunity for them to say, how could they deliver on their craft, but also learn how to play a hand in this culture of creative problem solving that we're fostering across disciplines.
You are a strong proponent for building more diverse and equitable teams and programs and building more diversity into the design profession. Recently, we've been seeing a lot of companies kind of backing off on their commitments to DEI programming. And I'm wondering, designers and design leaders in many of these companies are, we're in kind of a unique space and place. And I'm wondering what role you think designers and design leaders can play in advocating for more diversity in these scaled organizations.
I appreciate the question. And, definitely it's one, I'm very careful to say that I can only speak for me. I'm a Black male navigating corporate America through very weird, journey of multidisciplinary leaps. And I can say that, coming from a Black American background and set of lived experiences that are generational, I do understand what marginalization and being sort of counted out at the first blush. I know what that feels like. Those stories have been, sort of cascaded through my family story. At the same time, I can say through intersectionalities, I understand what privilege feels like as a male when I walk into a corporate setting and how my voice is perceived and received compared to maybe my non-male peers. I might be given the benefit of the doubt more just based on the stature of my voice compared to someone else. So I felt that too. So, we are intersectional human beings navigating an experience. I definitely know that, there's pros and cons in terms of like how we might have seen DEI deployed within companies. It gets unfortunate when it gets sort of placed under HR as a pillar around counting heads, and we're counting people, and there's all these stigmas like, oh, is that a diversity hire? And, these unfortunate terms that get tossed around. I am sobered, again, only speaking for me, when I look at a lot of brands, a lot of companies, a lot of high-powered studios claiming to design for certain demographics of people, and I don't see those people reflected in their ranks at all. And, in design, it's like a paltry 1% to 3%, depending on discipline. It's even worse when you go up the leadership ranks. And no surprise, when you look at the boardrooms and C-levels of a lot of the organizations too, it's embarrassingly low. Again, when they might be designing for a demographic, in particular a city environment where it might be half Black people, or nationwide 13% Black people. And I don't see that representation. And, in the creative field too, there's a lot of art and science in our work, of course, and that leaves room for a lot of subjective behavior. Unfortunately, a lot of gatekeeping where a lot of leaders in our field might rest on their laurels and not see the bigger opportunity. But as an innovator, as a creative, and as designers who are charged with shaping and creating features, I'm seeing a much smaller world now, thanks to digital connectivity, this beautiful tapestry of intersectionalities, demographics, all the different ways you could slice our global society. When the teams that are claiming to design this great stuff are not mirroring that beautiful tapestry that is the world, then we're underserving our ability to create the right features. We might be throwing any design at them versus the right design. We might be throwing something that could be arguably harmful to that audience versus really sweating the cultural nuances, the complexities, and having the fluidity in our problem solving to be able to, self-interrogate and recognize that, we actually, our methods here might be flawed and we might need to break them apart and take a different direction. And I've definitely been on projects in recent years where that has happened, where we've had to blow things up and make it very uncomfortable, but realizing the cognitive dissonance that we need to address versus allowing things to just continue, and we're shipping harmful stuff to those audiences. So,
which is important, because if we're shipping harmful stuff, then that has business consequences, right? So then it becomes a very serious business conversation, in addition to being a conversation around values and virtue and corporate culture and so on, all of which are extremely important. And yet, when we think about how to make sustainable change in big companies, and you see how companies sustainably change over time, the pattern is pretty much always based on what's important to the business.
That's right. And if the business is not relevant, and what got you here as a business platform might not be what you need to get you to the next 10 to 15 years of business success,
Yeah.
And you want to better connect to your audience, you have to be relevant. You have to respect culture. And, if you're resting on laurels and you're allowing gatekeeping behavior to keep folks out, it might not harm you now, but it's going to harm you gravely later as a business.
Do you think that designers and design teams can possibly model this reality of a diverse team, the diversity of which is part of what makes them great? I don't know. Is there a way that we can be the prototype?
No, I honestly believe it is possible. For me, that's sort of a two-sided perspective that I can offer against that question. That on one hand, unfortunately, a lot of design teams that I rub up against in the market, whether they are well-intentioned or not, like they tend to rest on their laurels of what they constitute as what it takes to be a part of them. It's like you needed to have gone through these schools or these experiences to be validated as belonging. What we just described earlier is that a lot of us, especially those of us who are underrepresented in the field, probably found design through a very different path than that. And, oftentimes I hear a lot of company design leaders stating that, oh, I just can't find the pipeline. I can't find the streams of talent. And they exist. It's just that you're not looking because you're not questioning where you've gone always. And you don't necessarily see potential, and you're not stepping up to sponsor people they're coming into design from a different lens or a different set of experiences. Those sets of experiences are equally valuable because we're talking about relevance. We're talking about, where there are gaps, you can train those things. You have to spot potential. And I would love to see our field do better, our leaders do better about stepping up to sponsor difference and being comfortable letting go of some of the formulaic gatekeeping tendencies that have affected our. The other side of the coin to your question is, I definitely had a taste of it at BCG when we were sparking digital ventures. I spent 7 years in total with that founding team, 5 of which before I left under BCG. Because of the stature of that global platform that they afforded us with all their amazing clients all around the world, believe me, we had to scour the earth to find the next design hire that would push us to be better. Not going back to just this one school because I'm comfortable with it because I came from that school. Mm-hmm. No, like our methods need to be better because we got to be able to address needs in Europe or in the emerging market in Africa or South America or Southeast Asia. We need to find the best and brightest who come from different pedagogies and practicums. And we need to make that work on our global platform that we now have thanks to BCG. So we were always under this intense pressure to make ourselves better and interrogate our methods and interrogate the evolution and makeup composition of our team, our growing design studio, while balancing global mandates with regional and respecting regional differences. Like that was the puzzle. And sure enough, after, I'm about to say goodbye to a team that I loved serving and shepherding, it was the most diverse organization I've ever worked and been a part of. It wasn't a zero-sum game either. People didn't necessarily need to let go to make room. The pie actually grew of that diversity imperative that we held.
I get so frustrated with the talent just isn't there. The response, it just seems like such a lazy answer. The talent is there. And to your point, the talent is not going to present perhaps in the same way that design talent might look or present having gone through a very formal academic journey. It does require a little bit more work, honestly, a little bit more time perhaps to find that person who has that potential and those core qualities, and then a commitment to bridge that gap to get them from where they are and a raw set of core qualities to being able to do great work on a design team with a lot of pressure.
Absolutely agree. And I think you and I both have seen a lot of teams and have had the privilege of coaching and serving multiple team members. I've never met a professional, no matter their pedigree, without gaps. We all have them, and we figure it out. If we believe in that potential, we'll figure it out. But everyone has that opportunity to reinforce strengths, plug gaps, to be a better professional in the end, and we all have that need. So let's stop with the formulaic laziness.
You have a deep connection with ArtCenter. Speaking of academic design institutions, great historic academic program at ArtCenter. Tell us about your connection to that program. And I'm curious to hear what you're seeing in the students of today. Are there some of those core qualities that maybe are surprising you in the design student of the mid 2020s?
ArtCenter definitely has a special place in my heart. It was my second master's degree when I thought I was done with school. After Nike, I was going to invest in 2 more years. So that was the place. ArtCenter had changed from its historic lore where you had to come from design to be a part of a graduate program. It was around the time where they were opening the aperture too, to really embrace multidisciplinary thinking, system approaches, futures. With that said, though, I have the privilege of serving as a trustee. It's my third year, I believe, on the board. And it's interesting to just understand what a college like that goes through when it comes to governance and, making sure that it's investing in the right things to help the next generation be more successful. When I go to grad shows and tour, student work and engage with students, I'm definitely walking away equally, if not more inspired and learning so much more from them than anything I could teach them, And I do see this this very inspiring hunger and curiosity that's on steroids. It's just that generation figures it out. They'll figure out a way to find a path more bullishly than maybe when I reflect on my time being a student and my early design forays. They just seem to be so accelerated in their ability to kind of get through that path of getting to an outcome that's relevant and resonant. Their adeptness to tools and the speed at which they can learn new software and new ingredients for design is just awe-inspiring. They'll have a clickable prototype in a matter of days. That would have taken me weeks.
Or semesters. I mean, my gosh, I think back to certainly my early career and then teaching early, decades ago when the technology was just evolving and, in those early years of digital design. And we would have semesters worth of learning Photoshop or learning, whatever the next tool was, Flash or whatever it was. And now to your point, they'll go on YouTube and figure it out in 45 minutes and be building on it later that night.
Yep. It's like that insecurity I feel when I look at the work. Can I even do that?
It's humbling.
And even with generative AI, I mean, they're experimenting, and I think our center is figuring out, their faculty are figuring out ways to recognize what's happening, and they're going to use these tools. Still teaching them the critical thinking, systems level mindset, future foresight, and creative problem solving skills to ensure that they're still unearthing a story. They're still finding their way through a learning journey to get to a relevant outcome versus just anything that they're throwing on the wall. I think I'm feeling that more and more in the work. I guess I have confidence that they'll figure out this whole generative AI question by making sure that the human is steering while these tools can be helpful to enhance the process.
Yeah, finding that balance is, arguably that's a big part of what they need to be learning now, because reality is whatever job they go into, it's going to be there. It's going to be a part of the tool set that they'll be working with in any professional environment. And so figuring out how to work with it, what the boundaries are, what the shape of it is, what the differentiating qualities that we actual humans bring to the intelligence is part of what they need to be solving.
One thing I love when I go back often to ArtCenter is they still drive the classical practicum. You definitely have to have the ability, you need to learn the ability with humility, how to visualize well. The number 2 pencil, that craft of visual communication, or getting into the lab or garage to make something, the shape foam or whatever it may be. That tactility, I honestly, when I reflect now on the courage that I see, the alums having in the industry, the courage to get up out of the chair and go to the whiteboard and communicate visually what's happening in the room because they learned how to draw. That's magic. When you get CEOs leaning into your conversation because you just visualize that conversation on the whiteboard and brought everyone in, and now you have room to insert your perspective as a creative problem solver. Those moments of brilliance cannot be understated.
Yeah, when we talk about differentiators for designers, that visualization and even more sharply, that sketching ability in real time, being able to capture a conversation or an idea, that is and always will be a differentiator if we can hang on to it and keep prioritizing it.
Lately, I think maybe it's because of my interactions with the schools like ArtCenter and others. I am curious about the journey that we all take as lifelong learners, especially through weird inflection points like the one we're having now with generative AI. I think it's been recently very sobering to watch design and other creative professions like marketing getting disproportionately affected by layoffs and these kind of things. Just echoing the conversations I have with a lot of peers. Just around finding threads of hope that the value of creative problem solving is not going to go away. So if anything, I predict it's only going to increase. But finding threads of hope that bring us across this chasm, because I think unfortunately a lot of companies are operating with very myopic mindsets around, I got to chase AI because Wall Street says I need to, because they're rewarding that competitor over here for doing it, or Wall Street or even venture capital is saying you need to cut costs and automate this because XYZ player is doing it over here. Why? It's just that short-term myopia. I hope that we can shine a light on those leaders, those pioneers, those practitioners that are cutting through that noise and showing the value that I think we all know is there, and give us threads of optimism that we will get over this valley and see a vibrant future for the field of design.
I couldn't agree more. And early in that segment, Kevin, you mentioned lifelong learning. And I think that's so needed. The pace of change is so rapid now. And what I think we lose touch with is that every time something changes, we need to learn the new stuff. And sadly, one of the first things that I see going in these, larger design programs in big companies is the investment and the budget and the resources for professional development. That's the first thing that gets kind of redlined off the budget. And talk about short-sighted decisions. I mean, you've got to have a workforce and teams that are world-class, like as sharp as it gets. And if you're cutting that part of your budget, which is usually a drop in the bucket compared to the overall budget, you're going to lose that edge.
Cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Mm-hmm. What a great conversation, Kevin. This has been amazing. We've covered a lot of territory. We've talked a little bit and touched on many of the themes that are in your book, Reimagining Design. And I know you've got a new book that, tell me where you are in the publishing cycle. I know that's a very complex process. And tell us, what we can expect and when we can expect it.
No, appreciate that. And definitely thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation and the thoughtfulness of your questions. I think these are important themes for the future of design. Yes, the second book is written. I can no longer change anything. We're through like page proof and all that. We're now in the cover design and thinking about PR and marketing. But the title is called Nonlinear. The subtext is Navigating Design with Curiosity and Conviction. No surprise after this conversation. It will be out February 4th, thanks to the publishing team at the MIT Press. And honestly, it can stand on its own. I think it'll be familiar to readers of Reimagining Design. But in this one, it's going to really unpack a lot of the non-linearities and nuance of navigating an innovation journey to get to a relevant and resonant outcome. All the pivots, all the twists and turns, and really shining a light on those realities, and that sometimes the business world beats a lot of the non-linearity and nuance out of the process when we expect teams to navigate a prescribed recipe of methods. I want to showcase the different stuff that's so necessary.
Eagerly awaiting that.
Thank you.
I think you've got a unique point of view and an ability to both be in the work and also to step back and see the environment where it's all happening. And I love that about Reimagining Design. I think you've really struck that balance so well. So really, really looking forward to Nonlinear coming out in February of 2025.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's all for this episode of This is a Prototype, the Design Leadership Podcast. Special thanks to Scott Leach of Brandspeak Communications for his production assistance, and to Graham Barton for his original theme music. I'd love for you to help me grow the audience for this podcast by liking and following it on your favorite podcast platform. And I'd also love your help finding great design leaders for future episodes of the show. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn with your ideas. You can find out more about my work as a design leader on my website, dougpowell.design. That's all for now. We'll see you next time.